I'm Adam from Roots to Fruit. The winter time. At this time of the year, it can seem as though there's not much living in the natural world. But if you listen very carefully, you can hear that these trees and plants aren't dead, but actually they're just snoring their heads off. What happens to our trees and plants in the winter time? Most trees and plants fall generally into two groups. And the first group I want us to have a think about are called deciduous trees. Leafless trees, like these ones, are deciduous trees. They are the trees that shed their leaves in the autumn and the winter time. Leafless trees, like these ones, are the great indicator that we're in the winter, that the tree is sleeping or dormant, and it's waiting for the great alarm clock of the spring to wake it up so that it can push out its buds and its leaves again. And it's the relationship that deciduous trees have with their leaves that I'd like us to think about, because it's that relationship that tells us why the tree sheds them in the autumn. In the spring and the summer, deciduous trees put on their leaves. Hundreds, thousands of leaves, each one acting like a tiny little solar panel, collecting sunlight and converting the sunlight into energy, converting it into sugars that the tree uses for food. In order for the tree to capture that sunlight effectively, it produces a chemical called chlorophyll. Now, chlorophyll is the green pigment that we see in leaves. It's what gives the leaf its green colour. And it's that chemical, that colour, that is able to grab hold of the sunlight and turn it into that sugar that the tree so needs for its growth. A good way for us to think about a tree capturing sunlight and using it for energy is to think about an engine. Think about the tree like an engine, but instead of using petrol to drive it forward, it's using the energy that the sun provides, captured in its leaves, to provide the energy for growth, both upwards and in width. It's using that energy to produce leaves and flowers and fruit and seed. But it's relying, isn't it, on the sun to give it that energy. But as the year wears on, as we move from the summer into the autumn, our days become shorter, our nights become longer, the sun is lower in the sky, isn't it, as we move towards the winter. And so the tree is unable to produce as much chlorophyll as it once did. And so it begins to slow that process down until eventually, when the sun is at its lowest, it will stop producing chlorophyll altogether. And in fact, the tree starts to withdraw it from the leaves back into its trunk and then down into the roots. As the autumn wears on and the tree slows its production of chlorophyll and in fact starts to withdraw that green chemical back into itself, it draws it out of its leaves, which interestingly reveals other colours within the leaf. We're all familiar, aren't we, in the autumn time, of leaves changing colour. those wonderful reds and browns and yellows and oranges, sometimes even purples. Well, those colours existed in the leaf all along, but because the green chlorophyll is such a strong colour, it meant that those other bright colours were hidden. But now, as the tree goes into dormancy, as it starts to go to sleep for the winter, those colours are revealed. With the winter here, and the tree no longer requiring its leaves to capture sunlight, it has no need for them anymore, and so the tree sheds them. It loses its leaves in the autumn time, and it does this for a number of reasons. Firstly, can you imagine on a day like today if these deciduous trees had kept their leaves? With all of this snow that's fallen on them during the winter time, the branches on those trees would have become really heavy if they'd kept their leaves and the snow had sat on the leaves, and that can lead to breaks. The branches can snap off and break. So that's a good reason, isn't it, to get rid of the leaves. Another reason is in the winter time, of course, we often have stormy weather, and that includes high winds. If a tree like these trees are full of leaves on a windy day, then the tree becomes like an enormous kite, and the wind can pull it out of the ground. So it makes sense for the deciduous tree to lose its leaves so that that doesn't happen. But another reason a deciduous tree loses its leaves is that when it has its leaves on it, it has a process called transpiration, which means it loses water. It pushes out water from its leaves. In the winter, it can't afford to do that because it can't convert snowy and icy water into water that it can use. It's storing its nutrients and its water in its roots, and so if it keeps its leaves, it could lose water, and so it's better for those leaves to fall. And so our tree loses its leaves and down to the floor they fall. But the story isn't finished yet, because the tree is super efficient. In effect, the leaf will have fed or provided nourishment for this tree 3 times. Once when it captured the sunlight in the spring and in the summer. Again, when the tree began to draw the chlorophyll back into itself in the autumn, ready to store in its roots. And finally, when these leaves fall to the woodland floor again, they will begin to decompose and break down, and they will become nutritious part of the soil for the tree to absorb through its roots, and it will become nutritious for other plant life on the forest floor. And here we are in January under the frost and the snow, and we can already begin to see the bluebells starting to look for the sunlight themselves, fed in part by the leaf matter that has fallen from the tree under which they're sitting. So we thought about deciduous trees, those woodland trees that lose their leaves in the autumn and winter. But I did say at the start of the film that there are 2 main categories of trees: deciduous trees and one other. And that one other is this tree, or trees like this one. The evergreens. Evergreens, as their name suggests, stay green all year round. Examples of evergreen trees are the spruce tree and the pine tree and the fir. And often we will bring those trees into our homes at Christmas time. They hang on to their leaves through the autumn and the winter. And their leaves are unusual when we compare them to the broadleaf deciduous tree, in that they look more like needles. But they work in exactly the same way as the leaves on deciduous trees. In the same way, they need water and they need sunlight to create their food and their energy. The thing with an evergreen tree, though, is they're much more efficient at storing that energy, that water, and using it. The needles, their leaves, have a waxy covering which traps the water inside. It prevents that water from escaping during transpiration. And in the winter, when the tree can't access the water because it's frozen or it's in the form of snow or ice, the tree isn't going to dry out because of this brilliant design feature. If we think about deciduous trees as a monster truck burning through the petrol, burning through the energy that they generate through the spring and the summer, our evergreens are more like, well, little mopeds, using their fuel sparingly, a little bit at a time as the year progresses. Evergreens do lose their leaves, but it's usually through age, not through the seasons, and they're very good at replacing those leaves quickly. Next time you're out for a walk, or maybe in your garden or in the park or in the grounds of your school, don't forget to look down from time to time. Stop, pick up a fallen leaf and think about the amazing journey it's been on, from bud to a young leaf to a fully functioning solar panel, gathering sunlight and converting it into food or energy that can enable a mighty tree like that one to grow out of that energy, to flourish because of it. Think about it revealing all of those wonderful reds and oranges and yellows and browns and purples, colours that that leaf had always had within it, but it kept them hidden under the camouflage of that green chlorophyll. Think of the windy day that eventually caused that leaf to come floating down to the ground, where it provides a habitat or food for microorganisms and other living things. And finally, think about how if those leaves are left alone, that eventually they're going to break down and decompose and become food yet again for the mighty tree that once gave birth to them. So before I go, I'm going to set you one little task for you to complete the next time that you go for a walk out in the natural world. Now, I'd like you to take with you a little bag like this, little carrier bag or plastic bag like this, and I want you to come down and I would like you to try and collect some of these fallen leaves and put them in your bag. You're going to need about a handful of them. We're going to put them in the bag there. One of the things I would like you to do is to learn the parts of the leaf. That part of the leaf is called the blade of the leaf. We can see the midrib. The midrib is called that because it looks just like a rib bone, doesn't it? Running up the middle of the leaf, the midrib. And coming off the midrib, we have the veins. See if you can find a leaf like that one and see if you can learn the different parts that make it up. This leaf is an oak leaf. It's a lobed leaf. Now, Do you have lobes? I think you do. You have your earlobes, these little bits of skin that hang down at the bottoms of our ears. And if we look at the oak leaf, it's got those curves on it, hasn't it, that look just like earlobes. And so that's called a lobed leaf. While you're out and about, you might find a leaf that looks like a hand. They're called palmate leaves because they look like a human palm. See if you can find one of those. But the most important thing that I'd like you to do is to collect a bag of different leaves. Keep them damp, keep them moist in the bag, and soon we're going to produce another video where we're going to use these leaves for a really cool activity. But until then, stay safe, look after one another, and have fun in the natural world if you can.